Welcome to Bloom in Full Color, where we live life in high definition. This is a very exhausted Jennifer Moss and a very exhausted Adam Thompson. Welcome. Okay, so this is coming out first week-ish of June, and Facebook has asked us to talk about how do you combat the heat so that your plants look the best. So this is where I'm going to go back to basics. So first things first, there is a time to water. Period. End of story. And you can water too much, but you can also water too little. So I watched a friend in the greenhouse last night grab a canna lily. And she's like, so I can just water it the regular amount of times. I was like, what is your amount of regular times to water? And she was like, twice a week. I was like, daily. And she proceeded to walk backwards and put the plant back on the table because that does not work within her watering schedule. So let's start with the basics. Consistent water. You live in southern frickin' Idaho if you're usually listening to us. And what that means is we have higher light levels than Death Valley, and it gets up to triple digits, and you're lucky if you see 10 inches of rain in an entire year.
Yep.
Okay. So we are high altitude desert. Water daily. There's also a good time to water. You need to water in the morning or in the evening. Not in the heat of the day, unless it's going to flag or wilt.
Yeah, in landscape gardening, like an afternoon cool off was kind of standard, and I was just like, "What are you guys doing?" Like,
that's silly.
But they would turn the lawn sprinklers on for like 15 minutes between like 1 and 2, and I'm like, this probably isn't worth it. Like,
it's a waste of water.
If it's that really problematic, just let the plant wilt a little bit and perk up in the evening. Anyway, if you are watering in the heat of the day, water at the soil level and do not get the leaves of your plant wet at all or as minimally as possible.
Well, and your water is going to go a lot further if you water at the surface level, first off. Second off, if you do it in the morning or the evening, so you start the plant off ready for its day, or you put it to bed nice and wet so it has enough energy to get through the day with enough water, you have a chance.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still pro morning water. I don't think evening water
I'm a morning water too. I actually evening water this time of year. Mind you, this is coming out in June. We are filming this in April. So in April, I still evening water, and that is just based on my own timing at my own house because it's still too cold in the morning sometimes to water.
Yeah, that's fair.
So but we are transitioning out of this, as you just reminded me what day of the year it is. So thank you for that. I'm going to show you something else after this that makes me feel better about life. So anyhow, I've been asked this a lot, and then I've also been asked what
Josie Harney, stop calling me at work.
Where I love it. Hi, Jesse.
I'm gonna make her listen to this.
Yeah, be like, hey, in June, I need you to mark your calendar that you are going to be called out on a podcast in 6 weeks.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
So you're okay. So the other question I get asked a lot is, it always looks so good in your greenhouse. Why does it look like crap at my house? And it's like, all right. So first off, we cheat. We fertilize every single time we water, and we balance pH in our water every time we water. So right out of the gate, we are balancing the pH in the water so that it's most advantageous for the plant. And then we're also adding food. So we constantly have that advantage, and everything's as automated as possible until it's on a table. And then that is human automation. So, which Adam lives in that world because he does not have automation except the drip lines in retail. Yeah. So with that said, if you have a drip system, boy, howdy, good for you. And if you are having a hard time keeping things wet, do a morning water and an evening water, especially on those above 90-degree days. Like even on some of those hot 80-degree days, you want to kind of watch this. What I tell people is you need to be watering at least daily if you're like 75 or above. Or you need to at least be checking daily. Above 80, 85, every day. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And if it's windy, or it's by a door, or it's by an exposure, you're going to have to water it even more because it's going to dry down a lot faster.
Yeah, and the wind will do that very quickly.
And it does matter what kind of container it is in. If it's in the ground, you usually have a better chance because the roots can go further down. The other tip I would give people to make it so that your water goes further, plant a deeper pot with more soil.
Sure.
If you have more moisture content and more soil for them to pull from, you have a chance.
Sure.
So that's going to help you as well. What other tips? Don't be afraid of your scissors. You can trim petunias. It's not a problem.
We're talking about
keeping
heat.
Let's talk about heat. We won't talk about trimming per se.
But yeah, so first step, back to basics, as you said, like watering is the most important. You probably can't. I mean, never mind. I don't even want to say that.
I won't even.
I was gonna say you probably can't overwater on these 90+ degree days, but you can.
You can. You can overwater. Remember that roots need as much air as they do water. This is what I tell people on a regular basis, and the reason for that: your plant will not continue to produce a fruit or a flower if it is drowning, because there's no way it can reproduce because it is not being able to dry down and go, oh crap, I have to go through my life cycle. Because people are like, gosh, I can never get my tomatoes to green up at the end of the season, or to not green up, to red up, to color up. And I'm like, turn off your water on September 1. End of story. Just turn it off.
Yeah.
Only water when it wilts. That's how because you're training the plant to go through a reproductive cycle. So it's having to produce the fruit so that it has a seed so it can reproduce. That's its job. Yeah. So let the plant do its job. You have to let it dry down enough for it to do its job. During a hot day, that's not hard. You just need to make sure it gets water when it's at the flag or right before the flag. The flag means wilt. Industry term. So jargon.
I'm not even that
at
cool.
The flag. Not yet. You had $15 words in our last one.
Yeah. We'll see if they carry through.
And we're going to get coffee after this.
As far as air in soil, okay, here's a little thing to help you remember maybe. Biology is the study of life. The rules of life are that something has to reproduce, which you just hit on, and it has to breathe. Those are two of the biggest rules of life, which is why viruses aren't considered living. They don't technically breathe.
They reproduce.
They don't technically reproduce either. They tend to make copies of themselves. So,
they replicate,
which is a form of reproduction. So that's kind of hairy, but yeah, they don't have all the rules of living things. So root cells,
what about a virus?
Plant cells, they have to respirate. Oxygen empowers cell growth. So they have to have access to
sciencey.
Yeah. Also nitrogen. I mean, some of these bacteria eat nitrogen out of the atmosphere and turn it into nitrogen, which then
there's a lot more nitrogen in the atmosphere than people realize. People think
more than oxygen. What we're breathing in is like 40% nitrogen, if I'm not mistaken, and 20% oxygen, and God knows if I could tell you the other 40%. There's argon in there. There's a bunch of cool stuff, but
hydrogen.
It might be 60% nitrogen. There's quite a bit of hydrogen, I'm sure.
There's hydrogen.
Anyway. I'm just trying to drive this point in standard horticulture. A plant needs 50% soil, solid matter, 25% water, and 25% air. That is what should be in a pot for a plant to thrive. Don't overcompensate for the heat by drowning your plants. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. And
it's a bad combo, and it really is inviting for a whole slew of diseases, namely fungus.
Well, and I would also say be consistent in whatever you're doing, because a plant is going to rely on the consistency. It's just like having a toddler. If you keep them fed and watered and slept enough and let them play enough, they're a lot more amicable of a human being living in the world. Plants are not different. I've had so many women say to me lately, like, I just can't keep anything alive. I was like, dude, you have kids and pets. You keep them alive. You could do plants. It's just not something that's important to you. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, it's a lot of educational investment too. I mean, I'm still learning. I'm been doing this a long time. You've been doing this a long time.
Are you kidding? This industry is so hard to learn.
It isn't just, it's an impossibly deep
so much.
Well, so I get why people are kind of plant reluctant, because it's just a lot of.
Well, that's why you start. You find what you like to grow. That's how you get started.
Yeah.
You find something you like. I like fresh food, and I like things to taste good, and they taste so much better out of my garden. So that's where I started. And then I'm like, oh shit, flowers pay the bills. Maybe I should figure out how to grow those. And so I did, and I'm damn good at an annual. I'm getting better with perennials. Did you know every single one of my shrubs on my back wall came back? Oh. I win.
Good job.
Every single one. I was like, holy shit, I know what I'm doing. This is cool. I mean, it helps
been
that
losing shrubs?
No, well, my sprinkler system isn't exactly.
Spotty. So you've got a new irrigation tech.
Yeah, it's called a friend being bribed with beer coming by to check on wiring.
There are many forms of business, Jennifer.
Yep. Well, they also own a garden center, so they were the right guy.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's where you start. You start with the person that knows how to, play to people's strengths.
Sure.
You know what? If your strength is flower pots and you want to make sure that things survive heat, that's what we're here to help you with. That is our strength.
Okay.
Also, if you're in containers, okay, so let's talk about containers.
That's
so
where I was,
depth of soil, that matters. Also, drainage matters. You do not want things sitting in water. That's also bad. Unless it's like an African violet and you're watering from the bottom. Different conversation. That's an indoor plant. But if you have plastic versus pulp breathes, right? Pulp is like the material we have our hanging baskets in. But if this is like a patio container, how is the exposure around that? Are you on asphalt? Are you fully exposed? Is there any kind of shade anywhere whatsoever? That kind of thing. And if the soil has gone away from the sides and shrunk and you go to water it and the water just goes around it, you have not fixed the problem.
No, you've watered the sides of the root ball.
Yes.
And you're actually going to have that by submerging that plant in water
and getting the
bathtub.
And getting the
and let
soil
it sit there for like 2 hours until that whole root ball absorbs enough water that you can push it back down up against the sides.
And you mess with it. And so if you can't get it, say it's in a big container, you're going to have to come back to it a couple of times and water it and really get it kind of loosened up. And it's best
to not get to that point and water correctly.
But if you went to a concert over a weekend and left like a 12-year-old in charge or a 15-year-old in charge and their phone was cooler than water, or they slept in until 2:00 every day, it might not have gotten you done. You're going to have to course correct. That's how you do it.
So I mean, some of these people at the garden center will come in with kind of some impossible problems. And one of those is the heat exposure. They'll tell me like, oh yeah, it's a pot sitting on 12 by 12 pour of concrete, and it's a southwestern exposures. There's not a lick of shade, and they can only be bothered to water once a week. Like, what can go here? So
nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are things that can go there. It's just plan for your space, right?
Agaves, sedum.
Yeah, but I mean, you're really talking about things outside of our climate. You're not going to get a petunia in there that's going to thrive.
Or
you're not going to get
really
anything in the annual section of a greenhouse is not going to thrive there. But go for sedums, go for succulents, go for
sempervivums.
Yeah, anything succulent, drought tolerant, and even some of these perennials can sustain that kind of neglect. But one thing you can do in this impossible situation is polyacrylamide. It's kind of increasing in popularity right now. Polyacrylamide is the blue that they're always showing off on diaper commercials where they're like, look how much pee this absorbed, and they show it in blue.
Oh yeah.
Like polyacrylamide is what absorbs that.
Don't they come in little knobs?
Yeah, they're little like
nodules.
They look like the little blue beads in your toothpaste. Yeah, or like a Wrigley's gum. It looks like that. And there's different sizes and grades of it. There's actually a kind of it that can be like used in an irrigation system, like to increase water retention as you water. Like, it's nuts what the tech is coming out.
Well, and then there's tech in soil that'll actually help absorb, and then you can mix that into your soil as well.
Yeah.
And then that'll help do water retention through your soil.
And I want to clarify, I'm talking about in a pot. Like, our clay soil here in Idaho retains enough water. It does not have that problem. Please don't put polyacrylamide in your garden bed.
That's not going to help you.
This is what you would add to like a potting mix, like
in a container.
The Winners, Soilless mix, or like Miracle Grow product or Pro Mix, like this Black Gold, anything like that. Potting mixes. You add this to that to help them. Essentially what they do, that polyacrylamide stores water and it releases it slowly over time. So the plant will use all the water in the soil column first, and then this polyacrylamide, being full of water and then being in a dry environment, will start to leak its water out, and then the plant can continue uptaking that.
Okay.
So it's like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a fail safe, right? and I've used it commercially. I've used it at home, and it works. And if you talk to some of these old girls, they'll tell you they used to put diapers in the bottom of all their pots back in the day when they had like
Have you
watering
ever emptied
problems.
some of the custom planting stuff? They still have diapers in the bottom of them. It's still being done. Like literally last April. I'm like,
Okay.
what the hell? Oh yeah, we
Well,
got a diapers in the
You
bottom.
can make it look cuter, and you can like buy this stuff in a Ziploc bag, and like
It's a little bit
it'll be
fancier.
invisible. It'll look like just like potting soil.
Oh
It's
yeah,
fine.
usually this is like buried in the deep
But if you've
depths,
ever
and you
seen
gotta
those-
do dump it, and you're like, oh.
If you've ever seen
Okay.
those little like water beads that you put in a vase and you add water and they turn
Yeah,
into like
poof.
these gelatinous things, that's polyacrylamide, and that is exactly what it's doing inside that pot.
Well, you could also do self-watering pots. Now, that doesn't mean you water less. It means that it has a water reservoir that after the soil is depleted, the moisture that was in said soil
Gets replenished
it
through wicking.
replenishes through a wick.
Yeah.
And so that also is another way to do it.
It is, and that's really just to buy yourself some time in case you miss a watering kind of thing
Yeah.
or whatever.
It's a
But-
Band-Aid.
and there's
It's
some
actually-
limitations to that too.
It's actually what we do to the, oh, pardon my yawn. That's exhaustion. Yep. Here we are. Spring harvest. The downtown pots for Twin Falls actually have a 5-gallon reservoir.
I know.
And
I saw those.
we watered 3 times a year and everything died because they were drowning and they had never had any food. We're going to go to twice a year with a regular feed program this year. And by we, I mean the city. It's not us. We just deliver them beautiful and then hand it off. So I just take ownership of this program because we want the city to look good.
Yes, we do.
So
And it does.
most of the time. Last year was kind of a fail, but we're going to get it figured out.
No one reported that except people here. Because we have a high standard of quality,
We have
right?
a very high standard
Your
of
average
quality.
citizen does not have that standard of quality. And
Yeah, but it matters.
by all
when it looks-
accounts, everyone thought it was beautiful all the years. It's okay.
Okay, you're being
You're
nice.
being
Thank
too
you.
hard on yourself.
I'm a
miss.
perfectionist. I'm about to plant
I
my
am
own
too.
pots.
But these are the condescending things I say to myself. So I'm like,
Yeah.
shut up. You're a perfectionist. Everyone was
Stop.
happy.
Everybody's
It's okay.
fine. Well, and it's like you look at your garden and you're like, oh, I don't love that. And everyone's like, oh my God, it looks so pretty. You're like, I could do a couple things differently. But that's all right. We're always most critical of ourselves.
Yes.
All right,
But
so-
we're beating the heat in this podcast.
We are beating the heat. So also
Throw
the
up a shade
thing-
structure.
Yeah. Put
Throw
up a pergola.
anything. Put up a trellis, a lattice. I mean, a pergola if you're construction minded. I
An
mean,
umbrella.
break the heat. I mean, I know that we sell annuals and geraniums as like full sun, and in fact, the more day length they have, the better they're gonna do.
Mine do wonderful and they don't get any
you
shade.
can counter that a little bit and add some shade to their daily life. You know, if you can shade any plant between 2 and 5 p.m. in Idaho,
It will be so
it's
happy.
a win. Like that is the worst part of the day for them. And by the way, don't water during that. Like that 2 to 5.
It's a terrible
If you
time.
have to,
It's
if
a
you're getting
waste.
really bad wilt,
It's a waste.
trickle the hose at the soil level. Do not overhead water them, but it's essentially a waste.
It is a waste.
Anyway,
For sure.
so shade your plants, polyacrylamide, deeper container.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if you can get your pot like onto a kind of platform that doesn't receive heat as much as like concrete or pavement, that would help, like putting it on a wooden block or something like that. Just get it up and away from asphalt and anything that
Or if
becomes
you've got like,
120
say you've got
degrees.
a flower bed to the side that has like established shrubs, and then you have your sidewalk, can you put that flower pot in the flower bed instead of on the sidewalk? I mean, simple things
Oh yeah,
like that.
that's a look. I
Like,
like that.
that's it's not, it still serves its purpose, but it gets the needs it wants. And I mean, you're doing this for 4 to 6 weeks while it's in the heat of the battle. Like, then you can move back on the cement if you need to.
Yeah.
Whatever. One
Sure.
less place you have to weed.
In a flower bed, if you're trying to beat the heat, composting and mulching is going to be your best friend.
Okay.
If you're growing tomatoes and they're going dormant in August and July because it's too hot, which is why Idaho's tomato crop just all comes in the early fall, late summer, mulch the heck out of them, you know, put like 9 inches of straw down at the base of your tomatoes. That helps keep the soil cool. It tricks the plant into thinking it's cool, and it'll continue to
Produce.
kind of,
Because they don't really, they stool out when it's too hot.
yeah, 85 plus, your tomato is essentially frozen in time. It's putting all of its energy into regulating its temperature and not dying. So it's not
Instead of
actively
producing
growing.
fruit.
Yeah. And also keep in mind too, like sometimes the wilt in that like golden hour of 2 to 5 when it's just scorching hot is temporary.
And they're just suffering. So if you're really doubting it, put your finger in the soil.
Yeah. And sometimes
if
you'll
the
see
soil's
wilt.
wet, it's just like, okay, no, I'm just miserable and it's hot.
Yeah.
You're wilting when it's that hot too. So just think of it like that.
And oh God, I want to talk about all the cool things that plants do to wear sunscreen, but I don't know if we'll have time for that.
You have 8 minutes. Go for it.
All right. So
I get questions. I would like to learn something.
I get questions in the nursery about the garden center, rather, about what can take the heat. You know, people, again, impossible scenarios. They're like, oh, I have a 18-inch deep bed on the south side of my house. It's completely surrounded by concrete. It has a retaining wall up the back that's stucco. I mean, this is just, you're going to be cooking plants. Okay.
Right.
There are things that can do
cooking.
that. In general, here's your little botany lesson for the podcast. Plants, one of the way plants shade themselves is by microscopic hairs, which is like, if you've heard about cannabis growing, you know what trichomes are. They're little microscopic hairs. So a lot of plants utilize this mechanism to shade themselves because when the sun passes over those trichomes, it seems insignificant to us, right? It's microscopic. It's hard to imagine that this would be effective, but it is.
I don't know. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids taught me a lot.
That little trichome on the leaf casts a shadow, and that shadow goes all the way across the plant. So just the one is a little bit of break in heat for this area, right? Multiply that by hundreds of millions across the plant. They can effectively shade themselves with trichomes. This is why sagebrush can be green in the summer, because that's why sagebrush has that fuzzy texture.
Okay.
And that's why all the artemisias have that fuzzy texture.
I was petting Artemisia yesterday morning.
The wormwoods, I think Cerastium's in the Artemisia family, sunflowers, any type of ray flower like Echinacea, Rudbeckia. I believe those are all in. Is it Asteraceae?
They all have a texture too.
Yeah, and that's what I'm kind of pointing at is all of those that I just named and blanket flowers. They're all very well adapted to extremely high heat because they can actually shade themselves microscopically. It's totally crazy. Another way that plants can shade themselves is they will actually fold their leaves up toward the sun, because what that does is it, instead of the sun hitting that surface level here, they scoop their leaves up. You will see plants scoop their leaves up toward the sun when they're droughty and hot, so that the sun can pass behind that leaf.
Give them a break.
Yes. So then this inside of the cup here is shaded, right? So that's kind of one of the early signs of wilt is a little bit of like upward or downward sometimes curl or like drop in the leaf. And what it's doing is trying to shade itself from the sun.
That's crazy.
And it does that in response to drought because plants can handle like infinite amount of sun. I mean, it's a ball of solar radiation. They've adapted with it for
millions of years.
I think plants are 400 million years old.
Older than
they
us.
Know how to deal with it.
Older than us.
The problem being, if they don't have the moisture to process all that energy, all that sunlight coming in, then they burn, then they dry out, then they wilt permanently.
And they have to have their resources to do that.
So yeah, essentially, if they can shade themselves a little and they still have a little bit of adequate water, they'll be fine.
Okay.
Anyway, so if you're wondering about those super hot spots in your garden and you don't want to go succulent, you want to go something a little more flowery, go for those perennials with the fuzzy texture or the silver fuzzy leaves.
And perennials, because they'll get established, they'll have a better chance of drought tolerance throughout a season and as they get older.
Exactly. And, you know, that's worth mentioning too. We sell a lot of perennials that are drought tolerant. They aren't drought tolerant until they're established.
Yeah.
They need water every day or two.
Same with succulent.
Probably their first year. Yeah. And that's in general, by the second year, you can almost cut off their water in half. And then after that, another half. And then that's about as low as you want to go, maybe. But if you buy a drought tolerant, like Gaillardia daisy, for instance, and you plant it and you let it dry out for 2 weeks, it's going to croak. Like,
yeah, it's going to die.
They still need babied into that. They need to
They
acclimate.
need to root out and get established before they can do that.
So just, if you're buying drought tolerant stuff, treat it like you would a petunia for a little bit, let it get adjusted before you're like, go out into the Sahara Desert and have fun.
Yeah, I would say homework would be assess what your watering schedule is and make sure you're setting your plants up for success. Look at your conditions. Do you need to make any adjustments?
Sure.
That's the way I would look at this, because that's what do you do when you're getting a recipe? Do I have all the ingredients?
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can assign any homework. I'm feeling kind of uninspired.
Yay, spring.
Buy a triangle shade from my retail store because they're awesome. I use them at my house for everything. I have I keep my patio, it's like southeastern facing. So right now it's just perfect, it is
Mine's
a block to the
east
wind.
Facing.
Yours is shady though back
there. Yeah, mine is shady in the heat, but in the middle of the day, it's kind of hell on earth. But at that point, there's my big birch tree has shade, so I am hanging that little hemp chair from my tree, and then I'm putting a hammock up, and then I'm building a moon garden for said firelight petunias. So I've kind of created some. And then I have a corner project up in my northeast corner on where I took out all those crab apples. And I am in the process currently, and hopefully by the time this comes out, I have most of this done. I'm dissolving stumps that have irrigation right up to it because I can't stump grind because of said irrigation right up to it. Because when they installed this sprinkler system with galvanized steel,
I remember digging into that
70 years ago, they didn't account for that trees grow. And they put the sprinklers way too close, which is fine. I'm just going to cap those off and bury them. It's not that big of a deal. And then we're going to pull everything out, round up the shit out of it, and gravel it down and create a seating space and a fire pit over there.
Nice.
Yeah, I finally have a plan. Took me a while, but I finally have a plan. Only had to live there 5 years to be like, what the hell do I want to do with that corner? Because we are going to out on our house in time. And so I didn't want to do anything at the home because any capital expenditure I'll end up ripping out to do construction. So I wanted to go out before I come to the inn. And I can live with the shale rock for a little while.
Let me know if you toss it.
When I remove it, because it's not if, it's when.
Okay.
It's all yours.
I thought of some homework. It's what I already said. I invite anyone, especially if you're a container gardener like me, patio gardener, find a way to break up the heat of the sun in July and August.
Yeah.
Those triangle sails, like I said, a lattice. I've even built temporary structures for things that I have planted, transplanted in the time where you don't do that, which is those hot months.
I mean, even take a couple 2x4
TP shade for a plant that's freshly transplanted. It works great.
It works.
Shade your pansies if you want to leave them in the sun and have some full color. Shade your lettuce if you want to get lettuce in the summer. I mean, play with shade. That's my assignment. Play with shade, because really it's just physics.
It is just physics.
If sun can't hit something, it can't heat it up, right?
That's the theory.
It's pretty.
That's the theory.
And whites go a long way.
Yeah, black is not your friend. Black absorbs heat.
This trend in black pots up against the garage, ladies. Get white ones.
Yeah, I got black pots.
I know you do.
They're like dark,
so hard.
Dark slate gray.
I have tons of black pots.
Yeah, you do.
I have a black wall of pots, but I shade my shit.
Okay, well with that, you've heard your homework. We're delirious. We're gonna let you go. The following podcast, we are gonna get into stone fruit desserts and stone fruit recipes. Yep, that's a word. Recipes. There we go. There's
that was
no
a
tea
negative $10 word.
Woo! Yep, I need a nap. So that we're gonna get excited. Stone fruit is one of my favorites. So we're going to do that in June, and we'll get into stone fruit and get excited about.
Do you mean pomes? Like apples and peaches?
No, I mean peaches and nectarines. And
those are stone fruits?
Those are stone fruits because they have a big pit.
Yeah.
Yeah, stone fruit. I think that's what. You are much more sciencey than I am.
It's okay.
Much more sciencey.
I was wondering, I was like, is there a stone fruit, like a star fruit, you know, like who the hell's ever heard of that? But
yeah, I know what star fruit is. I like star fruit. They're cool in a dish.
All right,
don't taste very good. With that, we invite you to live life in full color because plain is pretty boring. Please subscribe if you're liking us. We are doing our very best to get these out in the middle of the season. So thank you for your patience with us. And feel free. We've crossed the 50 episode threshold. There's plenty of nonsense we've talked about in the past. And if you have a suggestion, something you want us to talk about, we do release a new episode every other week on Tuesdays. And we usually film them in advance. So let us know what you want us to talk about. And have a great June.
Cheers. Happy summer.
Thank you.